Greetings, global gardeners. This is a special day. This is one of just 2 days in the year where the season changes, and it really is a gardening day for almost everybody. So we're not quite there yet. It's still officially summer as we start the show. Autumn isn't going to be here for a few more hours, but these days of both the autumnal equinox and the vernal equinox for the southern hemisphere today is a day I like to put on my gardening calendar. It doesn't necessarily change what I'm going to be doing in the garden today, but I think for many of us, it kind of flips a switch in our brain because summer is over and fall is coming, or winter is over and spring is coming. And so it's kind of a mental shift that, whether we like to admit it or not, it does play a role in how we approach our gardening for at least the next 3 months. So I want to talk a little bit about that today, some of the philosophies I have about the equinoxes and how I approach the different seasons. And I'm also looking for your input as well, how you use the seasonal change to change what you might be doing in the garden. Or is every day the same? Is it going to be the same tomorrow as it was yesterday? Today, of course, is a special day because it's Monday and we have everybody together to talk about gardening. And it's a nice coincidence that we can talk about the equinox on a day like today. Now, this is more than just a gardening day. It is more than just the change of seasons. This is one of those rare events that we have in our gardening calendar where it's truly a celestial event. The equinox happens at the exact same time around the planet. So for me, it's this afternoon. For you, it might be tonight or later in the morning. The actual time will differ because of our differing time zones, but the moment has already been determined astrologically as to when the equinox is going to happen. And it's going to happen today. For me, it's in the afternoon. Now, I took a photo this morning of the sunrise on this day. And this is one of those days when you look historically at civilizations and how we as humans have used the equinoxes. Particularly, we do a focus on the spring equinox, but I think the autumnal equinox can be almost as important. You're aware of all of those locations around the world where on sunrise, on the equinox, you have the stones that mark where the sun is going to rise, because ancient civilizations used today as a day to essentially begin their growing season, or at least mark this point in the calendar, because it does affect the growing season. On the equinox, for the most part, the sun rises directly in the east and it sets directly in the west. It doesn't necessarily mean that the amount of daylight is the same as the amount of the night. And if you look, and I encourage that you do this, take a look to see what your sunrise time is today and what your sunset time is today. And you'll notice that within the next couple of days, you will have a day where the time is equal. The day and the night is equal. That's not the same as an equinox, but it does kind of give us a point in the calendar to begin to recognize that the amount of light or the amount of darkness is going to change. So for me, in a couple days, it's going to be the same amount of sunlight as it is nighttime. Well, this is where we start getting into the psychological aspect of the equinox. As I move into fall, my nights are getting shorter, just like yours do in fall as well. And that can be a bit discouraging for gardeners who still have those plants that we want to grow. We still have those harvests that aren't ready yet. And we can see that the days are getting shorter and the nights are getting colder. And the season is definitely changing. I've got peppers on my plants right now, and I want them to ripen. It's going to happen, hopefully, but there's less likelihood of it happening with each day as we move into the fall because the days are getting shorter, the cold is coming, and I know winter is just around the corner. But believe it or not, fall is my favorite season throughout the year. It's one of my favorite times to get out in the garden because those cooling temperatures mean that I can be active during the day without having to take breaks because of the heat and the dryness and the hot winds that I have here in Colorado. I can actually get a lot done during the fall months. And so this is a key time of year that I am outside. And unlike the springs I have here in Colorado, the weather tends to be more stable in fall, which means there are more days that I can get out, more hours that I can spend when I do get out. My spring is just so erratic and the winds are so extreme that I can't get nearly as much done. So that's one of the things we talk about today is those activities that can be done during the fall and what some of those activities might look like. I'll share what they look like in my garden. And of course, I'm interested to hear what they look like in your garden as well. But what else do you do? Do you do any type of equinox celebration to identify the changing of the seasons? Do you do anything differently at all? Or is it just another date on the calendar? Do you have that same switch in your brain that says, yeah, the summer growing is over and I need to start putting my bed to rest? Those are some of the things that we'll be talking about today. And I'm definitely interested in what you do. Mobius 981 says, I change my phone wallpaper. That helps. Now it's falling leaves. That's good. The leaves aren't quite falling yet for me. Our trees are just beginning to change. Here in the mountains of Colorado, they actually publish maps that show when the trees will change color because particularly the aspen trees up in the Rocky Mountains near me are just gorgeous as they turn yellow. And you'll have whole mountainsides of yellow as the aspen trees change color. It's all based on the temperature primarily and the changing in the sunlight. And so that can be mapped out weeks ahead of time. We know within a day or two when the trees are going to change color. And so I'm still a few days away where I live, but it's coming. And so, yeah, the idea of changing your phone wallpaper, I like that idea. That's something to definitely show that change in the season. DJC says in Orlando, so pretty much the same other than rain protection. So yeah, Florida and Hawaii and many of the other states we have, you don't see much difference in the changing season. But I will say for Florida, and I'll speak for my brother in Arizona, the fall allows the opportunity to do some gardening that you might not have been able to do during the peak of summer. In the deep southern states of the United States where it's just so hot, so muggy, so many insects, when the season changes, that changes as well. There's still bugs, but not as many bugs. And it's still hot, but not the scorching heat. And it's still humid, but not that unbearable humidity. And so, again, just like I like to get out in the fall to enjoy the changing days, for the regions that have extreme heat, fall may be the first time that you can get out in a matter of months to get some of those gardening activities done. And isn't that what we're all about? Getting outside and getting all that work done that we can as often as we can. And so Earthly Spaces says, Gardner Scott, that picture is awesome. Thank you. Yeah, it was right at sunrise. I checked my clock, got out, took pictures. I do that. And so that's one of those things I do. I do the same thing on the vernal equinox and the sunrise that shows the beginning of spring. I've done this for years. It's one of my gardening activities. I want to be out in my garden on sunrise when the season changes. Now, the solstice, when it changes from spring to summer or from fall to winter, I'm still in my garden, but I don't do the same as far as the sunrise. The angle of the sun is different. The time, of course, is much different. There's just something about the change of the seasons from summer to fall or from winter to spring that, at least for me, just has a little more importance. And so being in the garden on the day when the seasons change, yeah, that's one of those habits of mine that I've been doing and I continue to do. And I always take a picture of it. And I've been very lucky because one of the things that makes the sunrise look better is a little bit of cloud cover. And most days here in Colorado, it's very sunny without a lot of cloud cover. So I've been very lucky in recent years to be able to take photos with just enough cloud cover to show the different colors as the sun peaks over the horizon. So that's one of those things. And I can go back for years and coincidentally, in most years, there's just a little bit of color to add to the sky. And I love that. Shawnee Gross says, we are out at the garden harvesting gourds for our autumn equinox party. I like that too. Having an actual party to celebrate the autumnal equinox. Awesome. And then to use the gourds from your own garden, good on you. I like that idea a lot. I need to grow more gourds. I had intended to grow some loofah gourds this year, and I was just so late with all my travels, I didn't get to it. But gourds for autumn, that's really nice. The nice thing about gourds, depending on the type of gourds that you grow, you can get some beautiful colors, some incredible shapes, and they last for a long time. So you can harvest them and use them as table decorations, party decorations, all kinds of decorative aspects to the gourd. So if you're not growing gourds, think about growing gourds. And there's an idea for next year to use it in your autumnal equinox party that you didn't even know that you wanted to have, but now's your opportunity. Robin Garden says, huge changes in the lighting of my garden at this point. I have some beds that are very shaded in the mornings. My patio is hardly getting any sun. That means I need to move the Greenstalk. Great point. Great point. I have a video I did a few years ago where I talk about mapping the sun and the shade in the garden. I did that video in the cold months, but it holds true particularly for now. During those changing seasons, and particularly at the equinoxes, I think it's a perfect opportunity to really take note, like Robin says, of those shaded areas in the morning, because they're only going to get more shade, or they're going to get less shade depending on which season you're moving into. But for those of us where the sun is lower in the sky, and it will continue to be lower in the sky for another 6 months, the shade is going to increase in many areas of our garden. So right now, it's going to be the sunniest that it's going to be for 6 months. And you can actually map it. And so if you think about it, it's a sine wave, the way that the sun and in our garden works. So if you start mapping the amount of sun you have and the amount of shade you have beginning today, and if you do it for the next 3 months, then you'll be able to basically do the opposite of that data. You can still use that same data, that 3 months worth of data, in reverse. It's going to be, instead of getting shorter days and longer nights in 3 months, all of a sudden it's going to get more sunlight in the day and less darkness at night. And when it comes to the sun and the shade in our garden, think about springtime. So particularly if you're adding new beds, or if you're thinking about putting new plants in your garden, the big plants, the trees, the bushes, the perennials, you need to put them in a spot that's ideal for their growing season. And most of those plants, we really want to be in the ideal spot in summer with the sun, with less shade. Well, if right now is a point that you can begin marking the edges of your shade, the edges of your sun, this is the equivalent of the changing spring and the increasing amount of sun. So I do that a lot as I start thinking about the plants I'm going to be putting in my garden, because the trees that I put in my garden, I get as bare root trees. And the fruit bushes I put in my garden, I get as bare root bushes. And when you get a bare root plant, it's dormant. You're going to be putting it into the soil before the days are warm, before spring approaches. And so you really want to choose a spot that has adequate sun for those trees, bushes, perennials. But if you're putting the plants in the ground in February or March, when it's still winter, how do you choose the best spot? Well, the way to choose that best spot is to actually pick out that spot in fall, because you can identify the shade and the sun equivalents in spring. If you choose that spot appropriately, the plant's going to do wonderfully for the rest of its life in your garden. So that is one of those activities that I like to do during this time of year, is map out where I'm going to put new plants next year, because I can mark a spot that gets adequate sun and doesn't get too much shade, or the opposite, because I've got my fences built in my walled garden. I used to call it my hidden garden, but now it's my walled garden. And that's one of the things that I've started doing, is mapping the shade, because I don't have plants in there yet. I'll be putting plants in there beginning in the spring, and having an idea of what the shade is going to be is going to make a big difference in the plants I select, because I want to grow some shade-loving plants that will be shaded from the sun. I can begin mapping that now, so when I put them in, either with seeds in early spring possibly, or as dormant plants, I've got the best spot. So think about that aspect of it. It can be very important. Of course, we all know that, to choose the right sun spot, but don't wait until the sun is high in the sky to put your plants in the ground. Go ahead and map it out now. And so as I get in the garden on these days, I'm doing a lot of mapping. I'm doing a lot of planning. I'm doing a lot of preparation for where the plants are going to go 4 months or 5 months before they go in the ground. The Backyard Gardener says, here in New Jersey, the end of summer, beginning of fall, I really get my compost area in order. Good spring season, having all my black gold compost ready to go. Great idea. Yeah, I was looking at my tomato bed. In fact, just this week, thinking I need to get the compost ready to go. I've got a 2-bin system. One of the bins is filled with material, and I need to turn it, dump it into the next section, and then start thinking about building a new compost pile moving into the winter. And I do that, of course, with all the tomatoes and the peppers and the squash and whatever weeds still remain and the flowers that I might trim off. And fall is a great time to start thinking about your compost and getting it ready to go. Either using the compost materials that you've already developed this summer and are about ready to be added to the garden. That's a great thing to do. I highly recommend your own compost as an amendment in fall, But also, like Backyard Gardener says, putting it all in place now, having it ready for springtime. If you use the compost in spring, and it can be ready to go for that time. So absolutely great idea for putting those kind of things in place. Masabi Gal says, good morning from tepid, rainy Minnesota. I've taken sailboat rides out of Bayfield, Wisconsin to see the sunset and moonrise simultaneously. Oh, that sounds really cool. And bonfires are great. Oh, I like that idea. So good for you. That's fantastic. Yeah, being on a boat on the water to be able to see the sunrise and the moon. Oh, that's fantastic. I wish I had a lake anywhere near me to take advantage of that idea. I may have to plan a trip some point. I like that idea a lot. Good for you. That's that's why I say that philosophy that you might have of your own changes of the season and the activities that you do. I take my photos. I love the idea of being out on the water to take photos of the changing season. So good for you. That's fantastic. Shandy's Garden says, I'm so proud of me. I made the best potting mix ever with Bunny Poo 2. Potted up 9 large mums that I got on a $6 sale in Monroe, Ohio at Burns. Get on the email list if you're local. Good for you. We're proud of you too. So thank you for sharing that. Susan Suing says, an astronomy celebration for me and a reminder that almost garlic planting time. So that's another thing. And I mentioned it in one of my garlic videos. And I've done other videos in the past where I talk about the equinox. But yes, I use the equinox as a point to look on my calendar and say, garlic planting time is just around the corner. So for me, just the general guideline I use is 2 weeks after the equinox is when I'm putting my garlic in the ground. So it's the first week of October is my target date. And I will be doing that here in 2 weeks. So 2 weeks after the change of the season is what I do for my garlic. And you can do the same thing if you're putting shallots in the ground, for instance, in fall, or onions in the fall. Having this shift of, oh, it's time, we need to do it. That's why it's a gardening calendar event, because it really can make a difference in setting those activities on paper or on your calendar or your reminder on your phone that they need to happen. So yeah, it's an astronomy event for sure. But that's one of the things. I agree with you. Garlic planting is definitely something to be thinking about once the seasons began changing. Serena says, according to our meteorologist, fall officially starts at 2:19 p.m. today in Oklahoma. Yes, that's the time I use here in Colorado as well. And so it's going to be 12:19, just after noon on the East Coast. It's going to be 1:19 on the West Coast. And of course, for some of you, like all of my friends in Scotland, it's going to be 9:19 p.m. And you'll have to let us know in Norway. I'm not sure what the time difference is. I think you probably have an hour difference. So in Norway, is that 10:19 p.m.? And I haven't seen Rick check on yet. So, that would mean that in Australia, it's actually happening tomorrow. Of course, it's going to be in the morning, but that means that it's probably happening at like 7 a.m. in Australia. So it's happening at the same moment around the world. But as you can see, it actually happens at a different time on the clock. So nice that that's happening. Bowtie Life, Dave, good morning. Gardener Scott, I see you started off with my favorite greeting today. Great to see you this morning, and great to see you, my friend. Always nice to have the new people, the old people, the experienced, the inexperienced. This is just such a great group of people that we get happening all the time on these Mondays. Riverdale Gardens listening in the background. Hi to you, River and Dale in the garden. And so nice to see you. Red's asking a great question. Speaking of garlic, what are everyone's favorite varieties? So great question. My favorite is music. I love music, and I'm sure Jay is about ready to be looking for it if she hasn't already posted it. But I have a video that I did a few years ago where I actually grew different varieties of garlic and had a taste test with me and my family to try to choose which garlic was our favorite from a taste perspective. I really enjoy the flavor of music, but the main reason that I love music is it does better than any other garlic in my garden. I've grown many different varieties. Some do great, some do poorly, and music is just always on that list of garlics that do great. So yeah, if you don't know about the different types of garlics, you can check my video because I've got an example of different garlics to include Russian reds and Spanish or Russian purples and Spanish reds. I mean, there's just so many varieties you can have. But good question. I'd be interested to see what people are trying to find. Yeah, and there's Jay. I know I'm about 15 minutes behind on the chats, but there's the video, how to find the best spot for plants, sun map your garden. And I talk about that in that video that I did a while back. So thank you, Jay. Shout out to Jay Dixon for all the wonderful work she does on this channel. It's miraculous what you do. So thank you for being here. Dwayne says, I have a question. I have seen a tree with fern-like leaves with red-orange berries on it. What type of tree is it? It does grow in Alberta, Canada. I don't know. It's been a long time since I've been to Alberta, Canada, and I wasn't looking at the trees on ferns. So if you know what fern-like trees might be growing in Alberta, Canada, go ahead and put it in the comments, and check with the local nursery, Dwayne, or whatever horticultural society might be near you, and see what they can do. And then, of course, there's phone apps. There's a ton of phone apps you can use that the iNature is one that I use, but you can just take a picture of it and it'll tell you what kind of tree it is. So hopefully we'll get an answer for you here soon and see what others might know about that part of Canada. Bowtie Life is saying, question, we have 2 new low chill hour peach trees we bought Saturday at the Great Fall Garden Festival, picking 2 different locations with good sun for them, 6 to 10 hours. Any advice? So yeah, you got to have the full sun for the peach trees. 6 to 10 hours is great. And peaches, like many of the fruit trees that we grow, do require chill hours. And so as long as they match you, so if they're low chill hour peach trees, I'm guessing that they'll work for you. But pick a spot depending on the size of the tree. So my peach trees are semi-dwarf trees, and I will keep them pruned to about the 10 to 12 foot height and width point. And so depending on what kind of rootstock you have, how big the tree is going to get, bring that into your consideration when choosing a spot if you can, because the tree is going to grow and get big, and you want to make sure that it doesn't crowd out other trees, or that size isn't going to encroach on a shed or a house or whatever else you might happen to have. But also, I would suggest incorporating the idea of making that a sitting area. That's what I'm eventually leading to with my fruit trees. When they start getting to the appropriate size, I'll have the bench underneath them, and I'll have the pathway walking alongside them, because I think fruit trees just add such a wonderful visual element to the garden. So as you're looking at those 2 different locations, bring those thoughts in mind, the full size of the tree years from now, but also what else you're going to do around that tree. If you're going to be making like a tree guild, like in the permaculture world, where you add flowers and grasses and perennials, and you've got other type of fruit bushes around the tree, incorporate that as a potential idea for the spot that you choose that could also support some of those other plants around the fruit tree. So hope that helps give you some different ideas of what you might want to be doing. Serena says, I'm getting a Brix refractometer today. Cool. Yeah, the Brix refractometer is what you use to determine the sugar levels of plants or fruits or whatever you're going to be measuring. So good for you. Those are fun to use in the garden, and they really can make a difference when you're deciding what activities are you going to be doing. Wasabi Gal is asking, Gardner Scott, are you clearing out your green stalks now? Yeah, so I actually, my green stalk, with the exception of the green stalk in my greenhouse, that still has the strawberries growing, and I'm still eating strawberries off of those plants. It's so wonderful. But yeah, I've put an end to my green stalk season this year. Now, in the past, I have grown in my green stalks that are just outside my back door into October and even into November, because one of the nice things about Greenstalk, and you can check it out on the link below, is that you can get custom fitted covers to them, frost covers. And so as those evenings get cool, you can throw a frost cover over the green stalk and continue growing. And I've done that in years past. This year, because as I've mentioned a little in the past, most of my focus has been on the construction projects. I'm still working in the garden. I put an early end to my season. As plants began to fade, I went ahead and cleared out those beds rather than put in a lot of new crops. And my green stalks were similar. So even though I could still be growing in the green stalks, I personally have started clearing them out. And what I've done in the past, we'll see how much motivation I have and how good the weather holds up. But in the past, because I grew until the cold set in, I waited to spring to do my soil preparation in the green stalks. And so when I got the video I made a few years ago about revitalizing the soil in containers, green stalks specifically, I did that in spring as I was getting ready to put seeds in my green stalk. That's when I was adding compost and some fertilizer and getting those green stalks ready to go. But this year, because I did end a little bit early and I'm not actively growing right now, that's a perfect opportunity, not just for the green stalks, but all containers. I and many gardeners use that as a spring activity where we revitalize our soil to put our spring plants in the containers. There's no reason you can't do that in fall. In fact, it's a pretty good idea to do it in fall. I do all of my raised bed amending in fall. Why not do your container soil amending in fall? And so I've got that on my list of activities for the next month before it gets too cold, is to go ahead and get my green stalks all ready to go, so that come springtime, I don't have to take the effort to do the prep for the soil. It's already done. And I might need to top it off a little bit depending on how much snow we get that weighs down the soil in those containers. But even just a little bit of top off is a lot less effort than the revitalizing, the adding new materials. And there's less work to do in the fall. That's why I like fall as a time to do gardening activities. You still have a lot of time to get out there. The temperatures are still great to work, and you're not having to deal with pests or pruning or harvests or any of those other activities that take up all our time when the plants are actively growing. So yeah, think about that. That's a good question. And it's important to think about those kind of things on your activity list. If it's something you could do in the spring, do it in the fall. Or if it's something that you forgot to do in fall and now spring is going to be here in a few hours, put it on your list of things to do in spring. That's the way I like to look at the calendar to try to get things done. Big Will Dog's asking, I'm planning to grow garlic this year in containers. Last year, most of the garlic froze and died. How best would you protect the pots other than in a garage? So yeah, that's a common problem. I had the same problem a couple years ago. I was growing garlic in grow bags, and I experimented putting them outside and seeing if they would survive outside. they didn't do well. So the solution is often a garage. It helps moderate the temperatures a little bit more, and if it's an unheated garage, you can still get some of that cold that the garlic needs. Garlic needs cold to turn into a bulb. So when you plant the cloves, it does need cold exposure to click those little genes inside that clove to make it turn into a garlic bulb next year. And so you really shouldn't attempt to put your garlic in a heated garage that's not going to get those cold temperatures. It still needs some cold, but excessive cold, if your garage gets well below freezing, you might want to cover the containers occasionally just to help keep the heat up. But one of the most important things is moisture levels. The soil should not be allowed to dry out completely. If it's too warm and if it's too wet, the cloves are going to sprout. So you still need to maintain that cold so that the cloves stay dormant. But you need to do some periodic watering in winter just so you don't desiccate those cloves. There needs to be a little bit of moisture in the soil. So that's a point that a lot of gardeners often forget, is they think they can just take their containers and put them in a garage and everything will be okay. Depending on what you're growing, sometimes that works great. But for something that is alive, like a garlic clove, even though it's dormant, it can desiccate pretty quickly. And so occasional watering just to moisten the soil so that it doesn't dry out the clove completely, but not so much warmth and not so much water that you're going to wake up the clove and it's going to start growing in your garage. So protecting the pots on extra cold days and a little bit of moisture should get you through the winter without too much issues. And you'll have to let us know how your garlic turns out. Garlic in containers can be challenging, but it's well worth the effort if you can accomplish it. And it's finding those little things in your particular garage, for instance, that will make a difference as to whether you have the success or not. So Dwayne says, Alberta has a similar climate to Colorado. What are the best frost-tolerant plants for a garden? So it depends on what kind of garden you're talking about. So going into fall, if you are talking about your vegetable garden, the most frost-tolerant plants are going to be the brassicas, the root crops for the most part. So beets, parsnips, turnips, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, spinach, all of those plants that you might be normally growing in spring and now you're growing in fall, all of them are frost tolerant. And it might be a little too late for most of us to be putting those plants into our garden, but those are the frost tolerant plants that do best in a vegetable garden. When you start looking at the flower garden, it's seasonal plants. And it's the plants that are like the cosmos. The cosmos in my fall garden are very frost hardy, and they'll keep blooming for weeks after we start getting those nights that are dipping down and just beginning to hit that frost point. So look at whatever perennial native plants you have, and chances are that you're going to find some good ones. So my native plants to this part of Colorado that are flowering in fall in particular are frost hardy, and they do pretty well. My daylilies, for instance, they're not flowering right now, but they can hold up to the frost. That's one reason I did the video recently about dividing daylilies. That's one reason why you divide those kind of plants in fall, because they can handle the frost. So the late summering, mid-summering flowering plants are often a good indicator of a plant that can handle the cooler temperatures. Because when we divide something like daylilies, peonies are another good example. That's on my list of things to be doing as well. You divide them, you transplant them to new areas of your garden, and the frost isn't going to kill them. they're going to keep growing. The roots are going to keep spreading, and they're going to get established in the cool conditions of fall so that they can survive the winter. So any of those plants, ornamental grasses are another good example of any of those plants that you might be dividing in fall. You can consider those frost tolerant. They might not have blooms on them, but they're not going to die when the frost first hits. So the lot of perennials, you'd have to look to see what's native to Canada in your section for sure, to make the wisest choices, and probably to have availability for those plants if you're getting them from a nursery. But chrysanthemums that we mentioned earlier, mums are a great plant. And this time of year, I was just talking about this yesterday with a gardener friend, I go to the nurseries and to the garden centers at this time of year, close to the equinox. This, because the season is changing, a lot of the stores are changing their inventory. So even though the inventory might be kind of small, chances are it's very small right now in your garden center, they're going to be taking all of that out and changing it over to Christmas before you know it. Probably within the next couple of weeks, if not already, you're going to be seeing the Christmas merchandise. That's because they're taking out all of those fall plants. Go to the garden center and pick them up on a clearance sale and put them in your garden, because the frost isn't going to kill them, and they'll be able to get established, and the roots will keep growing. And then next year, you'll get flowers from all those plants that you got on clearance this year. So anything that you would be seeing, I won't say anything, but a lot of what you might still see in your nursery and garden center, you can consider those are going to be frost tolerant, because most nurseries are not going to be selling you plants at this time of year that are going to die if you put them in the ground and then in a couple of weeks you get frost. So look at what's happening locally, and that's holds true for everybody. And that's the kind of thing that is often what I use in my decision making. If I'm down to a couple flowers that I'm looking at online and everything looks good based on what the catalog says, I'll often go to the nursery and see if the nursery sells those plants. And if the nursery sells those plants, it's better to get the seeds and the plants from the nursery, but you can also use that as an indicator as to whether it'll do well in your garden because your local nursery is selling it. So great to see all the suggestions. Robin says that she's got the Armenian chestnut red, German red, and music garlic. Yeah, chestnut red is on my list of ones that I grow on a regular basis. Jeanette has German hardy. Susan has the music garlic. Serena says, I like purple garlic. A lot of the Russian varieties are purple, and so those are the ones that I tend to like as well. Red says, thanks for the tip, Gardner Scott. I'm just a bit up the road from you, so the music recommendation is very helpful. Good. Yeah, and in fact, I've got my bag of music all ready to go. When I harvested a couple months ago now, I set out 2 bags. So put this in mind 4 months from now when the garlic is going to be ready. But when I harvest my garlic, I take the biggest, most beautiful bulbs and set them aside to be planted. And I know a lot of people will look at that big bulb of garlic and say, oh, this is wonderful. I'm going to use it in the kitchen. The ones that I use in the kitchen are the ugly ones, the little ones, the ones that aren't as pretty. That's what I use in my kitchen. Those big, beautiful, healthy bulbs, those are the ones that I'll be planting, because if they look big and beautiful at harvest, then next year's bulbs are more likely to look big and beautiful. And so I did that with my music and with my Russian purples as well, chose the best ones, put them in a paper bag, and they've just been waiting to be planted at the beginning of October. So Gina says, music garlic totally failed in my garden because I didn't realize I should have kept them in the fridge for a bit. Yeah, the garlic needs that exposure. So if you live and are trying to grow garlic in a very warm region, a region that doesn't have the cold winters, you need to put the garlic in the refrigerator before planting, because those cloves have to be exposed to the cold to get that bulb development. Bettina says, love Mennonite, music, Nordic, Siberian, and Tibetan. The best of the 15 varieties of garlic we now grow. Cool. Yeah, Siberian. I've grown the Siberian, and it does well in my garden. So I'll agree with that. They constantly do the best. Big bulbs and cloves, store well, tasty. There you have it. So John says, favorite garlic for me is Germador. I don't know that one. Lovely flavor and good sized bulbs. So cool. I'll have to look into that. Looking into some, or thinking about getting some new varieties. So Germador, I'll have to check that out. GJ says, I did very well with chestnut red garlic in Aurora. And like I said, yeah, chestnut red is one of my go-tos when I get to growing my garlic here in Colorado. 54 Cal says, I grow my grandpa's garlic. It's a hard neck white with some purple. Unknown variety, as he just called it, garlic. That's good. You know, and when I say I grow my purple garlics, that's exactly it. I don't know what varieties they are. I've told this story a few times over the years. I think it was 3 years ago now, but I had 12 different varieties of garlic in my beds and had all the plant tags because they were all lined up in nice little rows in the bed. And primarily the weather with some hail and wind, the plant tags were broken and blown away. And I've got all these beautiful garlics that I harvested and I've been growing since. And all I know is that they're one of a handful. You know, it might be a Siberian. I don't know for sure, but I just know them as my purple garlics because I lost the plant tags during the year I was growing them. The music looks different, and I always put the music at the end of my beds. And so that year in particular, I knew which bulbs were the music. But Grandpa's garlic, I like that. I'll have to start telling my granddaughters and grandsons about that as they get older, that the garlic I'm growing is Grandpa's garlic, and they can grow it in their gardens in the future. I like that idea. So, because I don't, like you, I don't know what it could be. It could be a German purple, like Serena's suggesting. Who knows? Shandy's Garden is asking, what about the idea of planting comfrey around brand new trees? I've heard that works well. I do that. Absolutely. So I've got comfrey that the first comfrey I put in were in beds that have fruit bushes. But in my my mini orchard area with my fruit trees, I have now added 2 comfrey plants in that area as well. Not near the plants, like next to the trees, but in that same area, I've added comfrey. And yes, comfrey is a plant that you can actually, that is one you can use as like an apple tree guild. You'll see pictures or diagrams where you have the apple tree, and comfrey is one of those plants that you could put near the tree, and the roots go deep, and the leaves will be a wonderful mulch around the tree if you don't put it in the compost. The flowers attract insects. Now, the flowering of the comfrey is not at the same time as apple tree flowering, so it's close, and it's possible they could be in the plant that is attracting some pollinators to your fruit trees, but the timing isn't always exact, but it could be worth a try. But yeah, I love the look of comfrey, and I like the look of it around trees. So I've started adding some more comfrey around my trees, just not right next to the trees. That's coming. I'm waiting till the trees get a little more established to put in some fruit bushes and other plantings around the tree in particular, because the roots are still relatively close to the tree and relatively shallow. And so when you're putting plantings around new trees, do be a little bit careful that you're not interfering with the root development of the tree by putting some of those plants in place. So I'm kind of working from the outside end outside in. So I've got my comfrey now on the outer edges of that fruit tree area. And then as the trees get more established and get bigger, they're just a few years old, then I'll start adding some plants like that closer to the trees themselves. And that way you help get the tree established well without any compromising of that root development. So there's that video I knew Jay was going to get to. Gardner Scott, how to revitalize old potting soil, containers, and Greenstalk. Thank you, Jay, for putting that in. I knew you would be on top of it. I don't know how quick. Well, I know you're quick. I know you've got it figured out. For those of you who aren't necessarily as quick and experienced as Jay, when I mention a video that I have done, and sometimes I can remember the title, sometimes I give you the clues because I don't remember the exact title of my video. You can go to my Gardner Scott page on YouTube and do a search on that page of my videos, or you can just go to YouTube and do a search for Gardner Scott revitalized soil, and chances are the video is going to pop right up. And so I think that's probably how Jay does it, is just do a search with keywords, with the Gardner Scott being the key. And you can find it very quickly if you go to my Gardner Scott site and put in the keywords, and a video pops up. So it actually works out pretty well when you do it that way. And that's what I do when I'm looking for one of my videos that I'm going to reference in a video, or that I'm trying to remember what it was I said in a video years ago. I do the same kind of search on my own videos. So it actually works pretty well. Eva says, greetings from Truckee. Busy getting my garden ready for winter before I leave for Denmark. Oh, nice. We have not yet had a frost, so it's extra hard to put my garden to bed. Everything is still blooming. Yeah, that's a tough decision. Now, a trip to Denmark, that sounds fantastic. But that's, like I was talking about the Greenstalks, making that decision of when you're going to put your garden to bed, that mental shift of the equinox day helps me with that decision. As I was walking through my tomatoes and thinking about how soon the season is going to be over, it's like, okay, I've got to start thinking about what I'm going to do with these plants when that frost hits. And some of those bare beds that I was thinking that I would do a fall crop but didn't, now I'm thinking, yeah, it's time to start amending those beds. It's time to start thinking about getting those beds ready for spring, because it's time. And some of those beds still have some plants. I'm looking at my bed, and it's got okra, it's got cucumbers, and I had good success. I haven't talked a lot about this. Often when I'm asked what is my nemesis in the garden, what is the plant that I've had the most difficulty with, it's okra. This year, the okra did great. And I've got enough okra to actually pickle some okra. But we had a hailstorm a few weeks ago, and it devastated the plants. So it's such a tough decision. Even though the cucumbers are still growing, the okra is still growing, it's just not going to grow well, because the hail just destroyed the leaves, and now the days are getting shorter and the nights are getting colder, and it's so hard to pull plants that are still alive. But you do need to stand back and say, are they really producing? Is it really worth the effort of keeping these plants going in the garden? Or is it a better idea to just go ahead and pull the plants, throw them in the compost, and amend it, and then mulch it and put it to bed for winter? So when you have a timeline, like a trip to Denmark, it's a little bit easier, but it's definitely one of those things you need to start thinking about. How much of your labor is actually being used, and it's wasted labor? The plants aren't going to be producing anymore. And I don't want to say you're wasting your time, because I love getting in the garden and I love wasting my time in the garden. But could that be labor that is better spent in a different way? And amending, cleaning up, mulching, pruning. There's all kinds of activities that can be done during the seasonal changes, and it doesn't necessarily involve actively growing plants. So keep that in mind. Jay has a tip saying, I mound up the soil like bread when I revitalize soil in containers for settling and snow weight. There you go. Great idea. Because I was talking about the settling due to snow in my green stalks. Packing them full is a great idea, and mounding in containers is a perfect tip. So thank you for that, Jay. That is definitely something that I recommend as well. Red says, here in Colorado, I try to add 1 to 3 inches of compost top off in my raised beds in the fall once I pull the plants, cover it over the winter, and then I mix everything into the soil in spring. Great idea. That's one of those things when I was talking with my garden club this last weekend, we were talking about that, just the idea of when you mix things in, how much you mix in, and that 1 to 3 inches is right in line with what I do. That's how much compost in my beds where the soil is actively alive. The beds that have been amended for a couple years, and I know the soil is good, and so I'm topping them off like red. 1 to 3 inches. Great idea. Great target. I generally will put the 1 to 3 inches, and then I will turn that in now because I use the straw mulch during, and I'm primarily talking my vegetable garden beds. I use my straw and my crushed leaves and my grass clipping as a mulch. And so what I'll do is I'll top off with 1 to 3 inches of compost, and I'll turn it in fall, because that gives me extra time for all that material to break down, because I'm mixing in the raw ingredients. And then I cover the whole bed with a fresh mulch going into the winter. But if you're not using the raw ingredients like I do, and if you're using compost, then yeah, absolutely, spring can be a real good time to do that, because it adds protection to the soil. Compost can actually be a mulch when put on top of the soil for a purpose like this, where you're protecting your soil over the course of the winter. And then you turn it in spring, and it becomes an amendment once it gets into the soil. So great idea. I like that. Nancy's asking, for container growing garlic and no garage, will a bit of straw around, over, and close to the apartment building help? Yeah, potentially. It depends on how cold and dry your winters get. So generally, and this holds true for most container gardening, zone 7 and above allows you to do less in winter. So like in the Greenstalk, for instance, growing strawberries in a Greenstalk in zone 7 and above, you don't have to do a lot of extra. It doesn't get so cold that it's going to harm the strawberries. And the same holds true for garlic. I would say zone 7 is a good cutoff for container gardening. Above 7 and above, and you can't get much warmer because you don't have the cold temperatures. But garlic growing in container in zone 7 is relatively easy. And yes, just a little bit of protection is all you need. It's when you start getting into zone 4 and zone 5 where you get that really severe cold, and the soil is just rock solid in winter in a container. That's when you need to start thinking about that little bit of protection. So depending on what zone you're in will make a difference. But yeah, I would think, or I would suggest, not just the straw, but if you're looking to protect the containers, put straw in place. Great idea. But then cover it with burlap, or even like bubble wrap could be used to hold that straw around the plants so it doesn't blow away, and also to add an extra little layer of protection and insulation. So a lot of gardeners do that. Straw mounded over containers and then held in place by something like burlap. That could definitely help, and it's worth a try, depending on how cold your winters get and how big your containers are and what it is you're protecting. It's worth the effort. And if you can have it like right up next to the building, then the heat of the building is what you're holding. That straw and that burlap is actually absorbing the heat of the building, and that can make a big difference as well. So definitely give it a try. It's worth it, and it will probably work. If it doesn't work, then you know that you maybe needed to do a little bit different or extra effort for next time. Mobius is saying, I have peppers in 2-gallon grow bags. I would like to move them into a basement grow tent and overwinter. Do I have to trim them back? 65 Fahrenheit inside, and that's 18 Celsius under lights. Yeah, go ahead and trim them back. What you're going to find, so if you want to overwinter for the purpose of keeping them asleep, basically, before you transplant again in spring, it really should be cooler than that. 65 degrees is enough to keep those plants actively growing, especially under lights. So as far as overwintering, I think what you should be thinking about is more of a continue to grow, but you're growing inside rather than outside. For overwintering, the temperature should be closer to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, about 4.5 Celsius. And you wouldn't have them under lights. You want to put them to sleep so they think that it's time to go dormant. They won't completely go dormant, but their growth slows down dramatically when it's that cool and when they don't have the lights. When they're exposed to the warmer temperatures of household temperatures, they're going to stay growing, and that's not a bad thing. Consider trimming them back because there's going to be a little bit of a shock as they move to a new environment. But you don't need to do much trimming. If they're in the grow bags and doing well, and 2-gallon grow bags are pretty easy to move, because they'll keep growing and they'll still grow more roots. Those bags may end up being a little small for them. So I would suggest trimming back just to keep the plant size smaller so that they don't outgrow the bag. But do it. Yeah. Trim them back a little bit, keep them growing. You probably won't get a lot of flower development, but at 65, you should. The thing with most of these plants that we're growing, and I've talked about this before, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 degrees Celsius is a threshold. When the plants get colder than that, they're not going to be setting the flowers and they're not going to be developing fruit. But above that, then yeah, you can start to see some flower development and some fruit development. So peppers indoors can definitely be something that will give you flowers and fruit going into the winter months if you maintain that temperature. Absolutely. So I've been thinking about doing that in my aquaponics system or hydroponics system. I've got the peppers are doing so great, and it's like, do I transplant them and actually continue to grow them in my hydroponics? I had mixed success growing peppers in my hydroponics in the past, so I'm not sure whether I'm going to do that, but I need to make a decision. I need to act within the next couple of weeks personally if I'm going to be doing that. Muley Friend is asking, could you use grow lights in a garage? Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The key about grow lights, and so in my videos where I talk about starting seeds and growing seedlings and my whole indoor light setup that I have, the light, if you're using for plants, needs to be strong enough for the plants. And so grow lights typically, depending on the strength of the light and depending on the size of the plant, are only going to be a few inches above the plant. And if you've got strong lights, it might be a few feet above the plant. That's really the question you should be asking. If you're going to be using grow lights in a garage, what kind of setup should you have? And so you need to have the setup in such a way that the lights are on a pulley that can be lowered. Like if you're growing on the ground in pots, then you need to have the light that can be lowered to just a few inches or a few feet above those plants. If you're growing on tables or on shelves, then the light needs to be adjustable so that the light is just a few inches or a few feet above the plant. And so, yeah, absolutely, you can use grow lights in a garage. Secondarily, we talk about the temperature. Depending on what you're growing, you need to make sure that the temperature in your garage is suitable. So if you've got an attached garage and it's heated, then you can continue to grow a lot. I haven't seen her check in, but Yankee Sista Homestead has a beautiful garage setup, and that's where she does a lot of growing. It's attached to her house, and it essentially becomes a greenhouse because of the warmth, and she uses lights because it isn't really a greenhouse, it's a garage. If you can maintain the warmer temperatures in a garage, you can have a very active growing space. And when I think about it, because I use my garages as garages, I park cars in them, but I could easily do that with shelves around the outside. It's just my garages don't have the heat. They do get down to freezing, so I don't grow. But if you can manage the heat in addition to the lights, oh, absolutely. There's a lot that you can do in a garage in the winter. Serena's asking, I never watered my garlic in winter. Could that be part of why my bulbs were smaller than the ones I took the cloves from to plant? Possibly, yeah. if the cloves are dried out, if they're desiccated, then yeah, that could affect their growth when they wake up in spring. You do have to be careful you don't overwater, because too much water can rot the cloves. You're just looking to occasionally moisten the soil on those days when it warms up. So if you're growing garlic in containers and even in raised beds, the guideline is basically when the day is warmer than 40 degrees Fahrenheit, 4.5 Celsius, that's a day you would consider watering, because the soil is warming up. It's not frozen, at least around the edges and on top. And that's a day you would water, is when it warms up above freezing. And a little bit of water goes a long ways. There's not going to be much evaporation. You just need to keep it from drying out completely. So just a little bit of winter watering is often all you need to get some of that stuff taken care of for you. Okay, I've been talking so much. I'm way behind the comments, so I'm going to make an effort to scroll through. So this StreamYard app I have is actually making it much easier. It's brand new. So what they added to this app for me to see, I don't know if it shows up. I don't think it shows up for you on YouTube, but I'm looking down my app. There's a little icon that shows up next to the comments. So when I scroll through my comments now, and like this, when I get behind, I can actually scroll pretty quickly, and I can see like this one from Leanne. It has a little question icon. When did you plant those beautiful cosmos? Did you start them inside or direct seed? So great question. So the cosmos I started from seed a couple years ago, and so it might have been, I think my guerrilla gardening, the video I did talking about seed balls, I did some of those seed balls that year with the Cosmos seeds. So I think that's 3 years ago that I did that video. And that's when I first put the Cosmos seeds in my garden. Some of them direct sown outside, some of them in the little seed balls that I made. And I haven't planted since. So the cosmos that are growing in my garden now are the cosmos that are self-seeding. Each year, like the cosmos that I have right now, I let them flower, I let them go to seed, and then I let, because it happens naturally, most of that seed drop. But then I go around to those flower heads and collect the seed and then spread them around the garden. So it's still all direct seeding outdoors, but I just broadcast the seeds and let them fall where they fall. And I have beautiful cosmos that pop up. So so easy to do. And if cosmos grow in your area, and they grow in many areas, it's as simple as that. Now, most of well, pretty much all of my perennials, I did start from seed indoors, and then I transplanted the plants into my garden. But I do the same thing. So my echinacea and my rudbeckia, they're gradually spreading around the garden, but those started as plants in the beginning, and then I just let them self-sow as they pop around the garden. So great question. And yeah, I love my pollinator garden now because it, for the most part, takes care of itself with a lot of the flowering plants that are popping up. And I like easy gardening. And when the plants take care of themselves, that makes me happy. Good morning, Pat. Thank you so much for supporting the channel and that contribution. I do appreciate it. Pat says, making pumpkin pie and some soup with this year's harvest using group your pie video from, or using my pie video from past years. So cool. I don't know if you've made that pie before. If you've made it before, I think that's why you're making it again. I love my pumpkin pie recipe. So, the thing about my channel, and a lot of people suggest what videos I should make or what I shouldn't make. And I try to make videos about everything. So, like, for instance, the video that I did recently on how to divide daylilies, the views were terrible. Nobody watched that video. But I don't care, because my channel is all about everything gardening and putting in all those videos I haven't done yet. And I hadn't done a video about dividing daylilies. So now I've got it on my channel. Eventually people will see it or not, but it's in my library. My pumpkin pie video falls into that same category. Very few views on that video, but that's not why I did the video. It's because I grow sugar pumpkins, and I wanted to show how you could harvest a sugar pumpkin and then make it into a pie. And it's a fantastic recipe. I love my homemade pumpkin pies from the sugar pumpkins that I grow. So good for you, Pat. Kudos, claps, horns, and fireworks going off. That is fantastic. I'm so glad you're doing that. And that pumpkin pie video, if you haven't had it before, is a good one. The key is that nutmeg. That makes all the difference in the world. So if you haven't seen my pumpkin pie video, even if you're not growing your own sugar pumpkins, check it out, because I love that recipe. I make it whenever I have the pumpkin to make it. So fantastic. Jason says, Gardener Scott, my favorite time for garden infrastructure projects is late fall, winter, fall to winter, during warm stretches we get in winter along the Colorado Front Range. And so, yeah, and that's why I say this is when I make that mental switch of all that time I was using in my garden actively growing plants. It's time to get outside and finish those projects or do projects. At a garden I had, let's see, let's go back 1, 2, 3 houses ago, 3 gardens ago, 25 years ago, I had a major project where I built a retaining wall from an upper section. I was on a sloped property, so on the upper section to the lower section. And because it was sloped, grass didn't grow, couldn't really put much in the way of a garden. So I built a 3 to 3.5 foot high retaining wall with the big 75-pound concrete block part retaining blocks. And I got most of that work done in November and December. Absolutely. Because here in Colorado, we get those days in fall that are perfect for getting outside. So nothing was growing. I wasn't working in the garden. It took weeks to finish that project. The whole wall ended up being about 50 to 60 feet long, and from 3 to 3.5, almost 4 feet in some sections, and got outside, get it done. So yes, Jason, you are right. Infrastructure projects in late fall and the beginning of winter, great idea. And especially in a place like Colorado where we get so much sun. And even though, it's cold, you've seen me in some of my winter videos where I'm out making a video and it's 15 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 10 Celsius. And I'm outside walking around, sometimes with a jacket, sometimes without a jacket, because that's what we do here in Colorado. You just get used to it. It's so much sun. It just feels warm even when it's frigid, and a great opportunity to get work done in the garden that needs to be done before springtime pops up. So good suggestion. I'm glad you're doing that, because that's very wise. So gardening channel with hot potatoes says, for our dragon fruits, we add worm castings and worm tea post-harvest. Builds healthy immune systems for healthy dragons. I didn't know that. No surprise, I can't grow dragon fruits here in Colorado. But for those of you maybe in Florida that are growing dragon fruits, thank you for that tip. I appreciate it. Ania Cannon says, I don't turn it in, no dig. So yeah, when we're talking about compost, and that was the conversation I actually had in the presentation I gave in our garden club, exactly that. If your soil is already good, if your soil has reached that point that you don't need to amend it anymore, 1 to 3 inches of compost on top is all you do. You know, Charles Dowding with his no dig method, he's got beautiful soil in his UK garden and doesn't need to turn it in anymore. And he can get away with no dig by just putting compost on top. I have a video. You don't need to put it up if you don't want to, Jay, from when I was still building this garden. That video is probably 4 years old now, of why I don't do no dig gardening. That's the video. It's because at the time, this garden was terrible. The soil was terrible. The beds were just being built. The soil wasn't alive yet. When you have terrible soil and you need to put organic matter into it, that's when you amend. When you've got good soil and you don't need to put organic matter into it, that's when you can practice no dig. So no dig is another great way to do easy gardening, but you do need to have a soil that can support no dig gardening. I've talked to gardeners here in Colorado, because our soil is just across the board terrible here in Colorado, our native soil. And I've had gardeners come to me and say, I'm putting compost on all my beds. I'm doing no dig gardening and nothing grows. Well, that's because the top is wonderful. Above the soil surface is wonderful, but the soil itself is still terrible. You can't put the compost on top of the soil and expect that it's going to do its magic overnight. You know, it's trying to make a purse out of a sow's ear kind of a thing. It just doesn't work. But good soil, compost on top, yeah, it definitely can make a big difference when you do get to that point. Red's asking, eggplant question, what are your favorites of the new varieties? I'm trying fairy tale eggplant next year after a lifetime of not eating it, as mom tortured us with way too much eggplant as kids. So I don't have, haven't really tried much of the new varieties. There's some new egg varieties that I've been thinking about trying, but I haven't done them yet. So I really can't give you a favorite. The eggplants that I've grown, I think I have an eggplant video. I'm trying to remember now. A couple years ago, I think I did an eggplant video. The eggplant varieties I had were good old traditional eggplants that everybody grows. But I've been thinking about doing some. I don't know the fairy tale variety, but that's kind of the thing, like, you know, like you're talking about. After a lifetime of not eating it, I never ate eggplant, never particularly liked eggplant until I grew it. And then when you grow it, it's suddenly one of those things that's like, oh, wow, this actually tastes a lot better than what you get in the store. And it actually is edible, and it is something that you want to do again. So I think I'm going to use you, Red, as inspiration for next year. I think as I'm choosing eggplant for next year, I will look at some of those new varieties, and I'll be able to answer this question a year from now after trying some of those new varieties. I did a couple things, and I haven't really talked a lot about this because I didn't have my as big a garden this year because of my travels. But last year, everything in my garden was new. Every variety I grew was suggested from some of you, and I didn't grow any of the old stuff. This year, I only grew what I already had seeds from. Some of them were last year's seeds. Some of them were seeds that I've been saving for years. I put in some pepper seeds this year that were 7 years old and had a great garden. Things were wonderful. Next year, I'm going back to what I normally do, which is a blend. Some of my seeds are seeds I've been growing for years, and some of them will be new seeds. So I wanted to try 2 seasons back to back just to see how I liked it. You know, all new versus all old, and I prefer a mix, a blend, where some is going to be experimental, and some is just good old tried and true seeds that I know will work. So next year, new eggplants, I'll let you know. And I've never grown the egg varieties, but those are high on my list of something to start thinking about. And we'll move forward from there with, I don't even know what all I'm growing next year, but I got some ideas. And that's another thing about this time of year. So one reason why I like getting out in fall, especially as the beds are being cleared, is that you've got everything out and it's open, and you can take the time to start thinking about next year. So you can stand by that bed that was growing eggplant or squash or whatever it was, and hopefully you've taken notes, but you can start analyzing what worked. What did I like about this bed of squash this year? And what am I going to carry forward to next year? Am I going to grow squash in this same bed? Or did I begin to recognize, because I was mapping the shade and sun, that the shade came earlier than expected? So this bed didn't get full sun for the full season. Now, next year, I'll move my squash to that bed over there that doesn't have the shade. And maybe my squash will do better longer because it's not shaded as early. Now's the time to do that. Was the squash what you expected it to be? Do you think you should choose a new variety next year, seeking that squash that's going to do better? Or was it so good that you now know you have that variety in your hip pocket that will always be at the top of your list because it does so well in your garden? This is the time of year that is ideal to do that. And start looking at every bed you have and start thinking about that way. What will you repeat? What will you do new? Are you going to move the spot? Are you going to add more beds? Fall is a perfect time to add new beds, particularly the raised beds. You know, I'm all about raised beds. Fall is when I think you should be building raised beds and filling them with a good soil mix, and then allowing that soil mix to be populated by those billions and billions of microbes and fungal mycelia, so that come springtime, the bed is alive and ready to support new plants. Fall's the time to do that. And just yesterday, I was walking through my tree area, the orchards, thinking I should put some new beds in this area. Where should they go? I'm already thinking about that for next year. I spent a lot of time this year putting new fences and some new beds in, and I'm already thinking about next year's projects, because this is the time of year to start planning what you're going to do in spring and summer and fall next year. Now, of course, I do a lot of that in winter, but the fall is when I can actually get out and it's fresh in my mind as to what I just did and what I did like. And I don't always make note of everything. I'll make note of, the big things. Well, sometimes it's those little things that you didn't even make a note of that suddenly pop into your mind when you're standing next to the bed. And it's like, oh, I forgot about that. This is something that I need to think about. And so this is actually a comment from before, but I think it's appropriate right now. Mobius says, OMG, thank you so much. This was the general plan, was to see if they could still produce. And so we were talking about some of the container stuff and other plants earlier, but yeah, now's the time to start thinking about what plants are still producing, what's not producing, and how that's going to influence you next year as you start putting together what your summer projects are going to be. And I think the summer projects begin the fall before, because you're standing outside taking care of a lot of those things that need to be taken care of late in the season, because things are still happening there. Things are still busy in the garden. As I'm scrolling through, as we approach the end, I'm seeing all the stuff you've posted, Jay. So thank you so much for all of those links. It's fantastic that I can just mention something and then you're right on top of it, posting it. I'll be talking about this in the next couple months, but Red's asking, how do you all store your seeds? I just moved to a 20-quart clear bin with seal in some accordion folder since I stocked up my seed collection a bit more than usual this year. I'm glad you got more seeds. I got a ton of videos on seeds and storing seeds, and we will definitely do a live stream in the weeks ahead as we talk about seeds. Cool, dark, and dry. Those are the top three things you need to think about. So when you store your seeds, you need to make sure the seeds are being stored in a cool location, in a dark location, and in a dry location. And the container, be it a plastic bin or a paper bag or glass jars, aren't nearly as important if you've got that cool, dark, dry location. And so we'll talk more in depth about that, of course, in the weeks ahead. But those are the basics of what I look for when I'm beginning to start thinking about storing my seeds. And actually, I'll throw one last thing in there. And so with the garden tours I've been doing as part of my garden club, and with the seed collection that I've been making at other people's gardens and in my own garden, many of them are perennial plants that I'm going to be starting pretty soon, and then put the plant in the garden in spring, like I talked about with my Echinacea and Rudbeckia. The refrigerator now becomes a component of storage. And so many of my native plant and perennial plant seeds, I don't store in a container. I store in a paper envelope, and then I store the paper envelope in the refrigerator, because those plants can benefit from cold stratification, and they need cold to germinate best. So all of those seeds that I've gotten in just the last couple of weeks from other gardeners, they're in my refrigerator right now, being stored for another month or so. And then come November, I will be starting those seeds, because they've already got all the cold stratification they need. Too many of us, and I'm guilty of this as well, don't think about that until we are planning our garden in January or February or March. And then we see, oh, I want to grow this beautiful flower from seed. And you look at the seed packet, you do a little bit of research, and you find out that it needs 60 days of cold stratification. And it's already March, and you want to put it in your garden in April. It's too late. You can start thinking about that now during the season change. Start storing some of your seeds in the refrigerator, so that when you're ready to start them from seed underneath lights in your nice grow area, they're ready to germinate, because they've already been exposed to the cold conditions that they need to be able to grow. So much good stuff. Jay, I can't believe how active you are with all of this. today, but I have been referencing a lot of different things. So do appreciate the effort that you're doing. One last thing from John C. Scott, will you build fruit cages over your bushes and trees eventually to protect from birds, etc., or do you just accept the losses? So I show some of this in my videos that I shoot in my fruit tree area. I put wire fencing around all of my fruit bushes and fruit trees, and primarily as deer protection, but also for rabbit protection until the plants get big enough that they can handle it on their own. So yeah, I do build the equivalent to a fruit cage around my bushes and trees, but only up to a point. Once they get big enough, then I don't do it anymore. So for instance, I've got some Josta berries and some currants and some what else do I have in that section? Gooseberries that are small plants. And I've got them completely surrounded by chicken wire, by poultry fencing to protect them until they get big enough. In my big area around my gazebo, I've got basically the same plants, but now they're 3 or 4 feet tall and wide, and I'm not worried about protecting them anymore because they're big enough that I can handle some damage from the deer and the rabbits. So yeah, that's what I do. When they're small, I build the cages over them. When they're bigger, I just let them grow, and I've got enough of them that I can accept some damage. So thank you for asking that. Bettina, thank you as well, saying thanks for another fantastic live stream to me and Jay and everyone in the chat. And I hope you all have a wonderful week ahead. I hope the weather cooperates and you can get out. And do take a look, like I said in the beginning, to find out when your day is, that it's exactly the same for night to day. And then you can start venturing into the arena, the world of shorter days, until we get 6 months from now and it all changes. So thank you all for being here. It's so nice to see you all and so much activity. It's so wonderful. And for all of you in the live stream as well, thanks for sticking to the end and hearing all these wonderful things we have to say and share with each other. Have a great gardening week. I'll be back next week to do it all over again, same time, same channel. And when you get out there, you know what you got to do. You got to enjoy it. I'll see you next week.